Hello everyone, my name is Kyle. I'm with High Point Scientific, and today we're going to be going through some basic post-processing using a program called PixInsight. The objective of this video is to be able to provide a relatively simple post-processing tutorial that's up to date with some of the features PixInsight brings to the table in the year 2022 and beyond. Now, before going forward in the video, I'd like to bring up that although this is going to be what we consider a basic post-processing tutorial, using PixInsight and post-processing in general is not basic. In fact, using PixInsight can be very intimidating, especially for beginners. If you're completely new to image processing, we strongly recommend looking up how to do your own post-processing in Photoshop, GIMP, Lightroom, and more before you consider purchasing PixInsight. However, if you do have experience and you're ready to take the jump into PixInsight, then this video is for you. Additionally, all we're going to be showing is just the way I prefer to process my images. There are many different tutorials out there, each with their own unique way to process them that are just as good as my methods. Now, in this video, I'll try to explain the steps I'm taking as to why I'm doing the steps that I am to edit the image. But we've also taken the time to write up a PDF document that you can follow along that explains in depth what each tool does and why you want to use it. You can find this PDF in the description below. Also, every section of this video will be timestamped so that you can quickly refer back to a portion of the video. Now, a lot of the steps I use are also entirely user preference. We recommend playing around with the settings I use on your image so that you can create an image that works for your needs. If you're new to deep sky imaging and astrophotography, we have a great article titled Deep Sky Stacker and SharpCap Astrophotography Software Tutorial that you can find in the description. This article will cover some of the basic ways you can do image capturing with SharpCap and stacking with Deep Sky Stacker. The images we'll be processing for this video were stacked using programs like Deep Sky Stacker, for example. We also have an article on choosing the best deep sky camera that will help select a camera that fits your needs. Now, PixInsight is, for me, one of the best pieces of software that you can own for astrophotography. It's literally my bread and butter for post-processing. You can do things like stack, calibrate, combine RGB images, subtract nasty gradients from your images, and so on. Although it's not free, it is an absolutely invaluable resource, and I strongly recommend getting this software if you're looking to get seriously into astrophotography. So for this video, what we've done is taken 3 user-submitted images from our Instagram page that we've already been stacked and calibrated to varying degrees. These are images that are all linear, unstretched images. We'll be going through each of these images step by step, one by one, and explaining how to create a stunning image for each of them. Now, before I go any further into the video, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about calibration frames. So what calibration frames are is that they're frames that basically will help reduce noise and image imperfections and things like amp glow out of your image, and they're absolutely essential to take a successful astrophotography photo. So what I've done here is I've created a master light frame, or basically taken all of my images, combined them, and create an image with no calibration done to it whatsoever. And zooming in, you can see some of the imperfections. The most obvious one that I can see is if I zoom in and look at the corner here, although it's kind of obscured by the flame nebula, you can see what appears to be a gigantic glow right here, and that is amp glow. So there are 3 different types of calibration frames you want to be able to take to be able to reduce some of the cosmetic imperfections in this image. First thing you want to do is take a master dark frame, and to be able to take a dark frame, what you do is you put your lens cap over your optical train and then take exposures exactly the same length as your light frames were. And what this will look like as a final result is that you should be able to capture some of that amp glow that I was talking about. And if you integrate it right, you should be able to completely remove it, as well as some things like, for example, this is a row of dead pixels. You can calibrate those out, as well as these little dark spots that you can see across the image. You also want to take a thing called flats. Flats are pretty simple to understand, and what they'll do is if you have things like dust on your sensor or any sort of cosmetic imperfection as the result of dirt or anything like that, flat frames will take those out for you. They'll also take things out like vignetting and stuff like that. So really useful to have flats, and it's done by putting a t-shirt over your optical train and then pointing it at some sort of uniform light source. I like to use a tracer pad, but some people use the sky. And you can actually take out cosmetic imperfections that way. So strongly recommend taking flats. And you also want to take what are called bias frames. Now bias frames are a little hard to understand. What they do is basically reduce the readout noise that's inherent to the sensor. So as a result, you get a less noisy image. So these are the 3 different types of calibration frames you want to concern yourself with. You also might be on the lookout for things called dark flats, and what dark flats will do is they will help calibrate your flat frames a little bit better to help be able to reduce the noise in the image further. So be sure to take these. They're absolutely essential. Remember, those are your darks, your flats, and your bias frames. So opening up PixInsight here, what I'm going to do is go up to File and then click Open. And I'm going to scroll down to our first submitted image of the Andromeda Galaxy, and then I'm going to click Open and fire that up. Now the first thing you might notice is that the image is almost completely black, and that's okay. What we're looking at is the linear, unstretched version of this image. So what we want to do is actually have a preview of what this looks like stretched. And to do that, we're going to want to click Command or Control A. Command A if you're using a Mac, Control A if you're using a window. And what that will do is auto stretch. So here's our image of the Andromeda Galaxy that was again submitted through Instagram. And as you can see, there is a relatively strong green cast to this image. And that's totally okay. That's totally normal for a lot of astrophotography cameras. When you produce a stacked image, it might come off as really green at first. But that's easy to fix. So what we're going to do is go up to split RGB channels. And when you click split RGB channels, you get all 3 of the channels, red, green, and blue, split off from the main image. So we're going to go up to Process, All Processes, and then we're going to go down to Linear Fit. And what Linear Fit's going to do is elevate the blue and red channels to be up there with the green channels. That way we have a nice, evenly colored image. So we're going to go down to green, and we're just going to drop that first on the blue channel. This might take just a second, and then we're going to drop it onto the red channel. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go up to Process again, All Process, and then we're going to find Channel Combination. And then we have these ticked as auto, but I'm going to go through one by one to make sure they're the right one. We're going to click red, the green channel, and the blue channel. And what this is going to do, it's going to create a new image of these 3 linear fit channels. And we're going to click Control A, and then that will auto stretch the image again. And as you can see, that sort of green cast is gone, and we have a much cleaner image. I'm just going to go ahead and exit out all of these. Sweet. So looking at this image, one of the very first things I noticed that is if you look at the corners here, you might notice the stars are sort of oblate looking. They don't look exactly round. Now this user was probably not using a field flattener with their telescope, but it looks like they were using a refractor telescope, and that's totally okay. But this just goes to show the importance of having a field flattener. If you have a field flattener, you're able to get a nice flat image across the entire field of view, and the stars will look as they do in the center across the entire field of view. Another thing I noticed, zooming in here really quick, I noticed that there's these purple sort of halos around each of the bright stars, and that's known as chromatic aberration, and that's pretty common with refractor telescopes. That's why many astronomers go for triplet refractors or even reflector telescopes, because they help to eliminate these halos. But that's totally okay. It doesn't really detract much from the image, especially in this case. It's just something to keep your eye on when you're purchasing a refractor telescope. But what we're going to do is we're going to go up to Process, All Process, and then we're going to go down to Dynamic Crop. And what we're going to do is we're going to crop out each and every single one of these sort of misshapen stars and just try to get those stars in the middle, including the Andromeda Galaxy, as well as these two satellite galaxies. So we're going to go Dynamic Crop, and then we're going to click Execute. Sweet. So for the most part, we've taken care of all of the ugly sort of misshapen stars across the field of view. One thing I will say about this image, it's clear that this image has also been calibrated properly, like darks have been applied, flats have been applied, and bias frames have also been applied, because the image, despite the coma across the field of view, is completely clean and it's really good. So that's what you want to be aiming for when you're doing your calibration frames. You want to have an image that's, you know, nice and clean like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to Process, and then we're going to go down to Background Modelization, and then we're going to click Dynamic Background Extraction. So what that's going to do is that's going to help reduce some of the gradient across the image. There's not much, but I like to do it just as sort of my standard operating procedure when I am approaching post-processing. So I'm going to click Reset down here, and we're going to go down to Sample Generation. And there's a lot of different ways you can do it. Some people like to drop images, sort of sample points across the entire image, and that's certainly one way to do it. But in the past, what I have found the easiest way to sort of sample a gradient across the entire image is to make the default sample radius really high. Like for example, we'll set it to 150, and then we'll click Resize All. And then what we're going to do is I'm just going to drop these across the edge of the field of view here. And what that's going to do is create enough sample points to be able to get an idea of the gradient in this image. And I want to be careful not to accidentally include parts of the Andromeda Galaxy when I do this, because we don't want that sampled in our image. So then we're going to go down to Target Image Correction, then Correction, we're going to click Subtraction. And what this is going to do is going to subtract out that gradient, and then we're going to click Execute. So we have our background right here. We give that a stretch, and this will give you an idea of the gradient that has been subtracted from this image. And we also have a new image, DB, standing for Dynamic Background Extraction. And then we're going to click Control-A to stretch this image again. And as you can see, it doesn't look terribly different in this case, but I can promise you, if you have a lot of light pollution, doing a dynamic background extraction like that will significantly help your image. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to Preview, and I'm going to create a new preview mode, or Alt-N. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in to anywhere where I see there's not a lot of stars in the image. And what I want to do is neutralize the background. So we're going to go to Process, Color Calibration, and then Background Neutralization. Reference image, we're going to want to click that Preview, Preview 1, and then we're just going to drop it onto the image. And as you can see, it did make the background a little darker, which is what we're going for. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to color calibrate this image to be more or less precise to what the Andromeda Galaxy is supposed to look like. So we're going to go to Process, All Process, and then our Channel Management, excuse me, Color Calibration, and then, yeah, there's a lot of these options here. It's easy to get confused, but Color Calibration, and then click Color Calibration. So we're going to leave our white reference as the target image. We're going to uncheck structure detection, and then we're going to have background reference set as our preview. And then we're just going to drop this onto the image. And as you can see, we have a much sort of wider image, kind of what you would expect of the Andromeda Galaxy. And then we're going to delete the previews and then auto stretch it one more time. So zooming in here, I see that there's a lot of noise in this image too. That's to be expected. You have to stack a lot to be able to reduce the noise, and even then, you're still going to have some noise in your image. But that's pretty easy to take care of, especially nowadays. I've actually downloaded a script known as Easy Processing Suite, and then I'm going to go down there from Script, Easy Processing Suite, and then I'm going to go to Easy Denoise. Now this is a super cool script that I found. It's not included with the base PixInsight install. It can be found on the PixInsight forums, but what it will do is it will basically help reduce all that noise. And you want to be able to do it in linear mode directly after you did a background extraction, after you've done a color calibration, and after you've done a deconvolution, which I didn't do a deconvolution for this image, but if you want to do a deconvolution, you are absolutely more than free to do so. So we're going to go from no view selected, and then we're going to go to image 05 dBE, and then we're going to run easy denoise. And this is going to take a few minutes, so what I'm going to do is pause the video here and let it run. So that noise reduction script has finished up, and if we zoom in, we can see we have a much cleaner image. There's definitely significantly less noise, and overall this is starting to look pretty good. Now, it's one thing to keep in mind before we go any further is that we've been auto stretching this image, but that auto stretch is only a preview. Let's talk a little bit about auto stretch. So what auto stretching is doing is basically showing us a preview of what the histogram will look like when stretched out. But we actually don't have the histogram like stretched out yet. We've only been looking at a preview of the histogram as mentioned. So what we're going to do, just to show you an example of this, if you turn off the sort of preview screen right here, you'll see it goes back to being a black image. And this is a common mistake many astrophotographers make when they're using PixInsight, is that they'll forget to actually apply the stretch to their histogram. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to Process, and then we're going to go to All Process, and then Screen Transfer Function. And that's how you're also able to control your auto stretch from this as well. And then we're going to go up to Process, All Process, and then Histogram Transformation. And then from Histogram Transformation, we're going to go from No View to Image 5 dBE, and that's just the name of the image that I'm processing. And then what we're going to do is we're going to apply that preview stretch to the histogram, and then we're going to click Apply. So this will while out your image, and this is like what just happened, but it's totally okay. Just turn off the preview, and there you go. So this image is finally a stretched image with all of the color calibration and noise reduction that we did earlier. One thing you might notice is that the contrast in this image isn't very good still. So what we're going to do is we have a couple options. We could make a mask and adjust the curves to be able to, lower the background and increase the brightness of the galaxy. But for galaxies like the Andromeda galaxy, what I find really easy to do is go up to Process and then go over to Arcsine Stretch. And what that will do is it'll stretch out the image a little bit and also increase the contrast. So what I'm going to do is open up a real-time preview. Let's make this a little bit bigger. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a bit of a stretch here to the image, but I'm also going to up the black point a bit, and that will help increase the contrast. You don't want to go too far because then you'll start clipping your blacks in your image, and that just looks terrible. But we're only going to do it just a little bit to get sort of a dark gray, cast to the background. I think that looks pretty good. And then we're going to apply this to the image. And then we're going to close out the preview. And as you can see, we now have a much higher contrast image that's a little brighter. And this is already starting to look really good, but there's a few more things we can do here. What I'm going to do is go up to extract the luminance component. And what I'm going to do with the luminance component is I'm actually going to combine it back into the image to be able to up the saturation a little bit. You might notice the Andromeda galaxy looks kind of like a uniform gray here. We want to be able to bring out sort of the blues and the outer spiral bands, as well as the deeper yellows in the center of the Andromeda galaxy. So we're going to go up to Process, All Process, and then LRGB combination. And then what we're going to do is we're going to untick red, green, and blue. And then we're going to make sure our luminous channel is the one being selected. Then we're going to go down to saturation, and then we're going to drop that down to 2.4, somewhere around there. This value just sort of depends on your taste. If you drop it even lower, You get a higher saturated image. If you make it higher, you get a lower saturated image, but I find 2.5 to be, or excuse me, 0.25 to be pretty good. And then what I'm going to do is have chrominance noise reduction checked, and then I'm going to drop this onto the image. And this should just take a few seconds. Sweet. So as you can see, it did up the colors a little bit. We do have a little bit more of those blues coming in, but you might notice that sort of green tint has come back, and we don't want there to be a green image in our final image. We want there to just be the whites, the blues, the yellows. So we can get rid of that by going up to Process, All Process, and find SNR. And what SNR will do is it'll help remove some of that green color. But you never want to remove 100%. I find that doesn't look good. Some astrophotographers like to remove 100% of the green. I just find that it results in kind of a funky looking background. So what I'm going to do is remove 80% of the green and then drop it onto our image. Sweet. And as you can see, we do have a little bit more of the blues coming out, as well as some of the deeper yellows. If you had a cooled CMOS sensor, for example, or a camera that was more sensitive to hydrogen alpha, you'd be able to bring out a lot more of those colors. But in this case, it does not appear we managed to capture much of the way of the colors here, but that's totally okay. This is still looking like a really good image. And we're almost done here. But we're going to do one more step that I like to do, and especially with these halos around these stars. If you look closely, we still have those halos, and that is again from the chromatic aberration as a result of the telescope. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go up to Script, and then we're going to go to Easy Processing Suite, and then we're going to go to Easy Star Reduction. Now, I personally am not a fan of the way that my stars look after I run this software, but I do like the masks that it produces. So we're going to go select our image, and then we're just going to create a star mask for reduction. So that's just going to take a few minutes here. Actually, I think this is going to take a little longer than I expected, so what I'm going to do is just pause the video real quick and come back when that mask is ready. Okay, so now we have our mask. So what I'm going to do is go up to Mask, select Mask, and then go down to New Mask, and then click the mask we just created, or Easy Star Reduction, Image 5, etc., etc. And then we're going to click OK. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to reduce the star size here just a little bit. And we're going to click Control-K to remove the preview of the mask. Go back up to Process, All Process, and then we're going to go down to Morphological Transformation. And we're going to have the operator set to minimum, and then we're going to have the size, actually let's reset this. We're going to have the operator set to minimum for erosion, and then we're going to increase the size from 3 of 9 elements to 5 of 25. And what you want to do here is sort of make the image look like a star. And what this will do is it will capture all these stars in the mask, and it will erode them a little bit so that way they appear a little bit smaller. And we're going to set the amount to about 0.5. And then we're going to drop it onto the image. And as you can see, that helped a little bit. We'll apply it one more time, see if that does anything different. We don't want to go too far again, because then I just find if you completely go overboard with this, the stars start to look unnatural. And then we're going to remove that mask. So this is very close to a final image, and this is an image I'd be really happy with. But we're going to do a few more steps. We're going to go up to Curves Transformation. I don't know why I blanked there, I apologize. What we're going to do is we're just going to, up the contrast just a little bit. I find it nice to have a really nice dark image. And then we're going to drop that onto the final image. And this is looking really solid, and I think we can safely call this a final result. Moving on to our second photo that was submitted. This was actually a 13-hour exposure of the Andromeda Galaxy, I believe, that was submitted by one of our followers on Instagram. And I'm expecting this to be a really clean image. So if I click Control A to auto stretch the image, and as you can see, like I said, this is an absolutely beautiful image. One thing I see straight away when I zoom in is if you look carefully, you can actually see some nebulas in the Andromeda Galaxy, and that is so cool to see. We're looking at nebula that is 2.8 million light years away from Earth, or 2.5, or however far away the Andromeda Galaxy is. So this is a beautiful image. And I also will note that this image hardly has any noise in it, and that's a result of having so much integration time. You know, if you stack only 1 or 2 hours worth of data, you're still going to have a fair bit of noise when you stretch it, but because this user submitted a 13-hour stack of the Andromeda Galaxy, there's hardly any noise in this image whatsoever. So we're going to zoom out. The first thing I noticed straight away is if you look carefully, you can see these black lines across the edge of the image, and those are just simply stacking artifacts. So if we go up to Process, All Process, and then go down to Dynamic Crop, we can actually crop those out again. And this is a very minor thing, but we prefer not to have that in the final image. There we go. So our next step is, once again, we're going to split the RGB channels, and then we're going to perform a linear fit on there. So you're going to go up to Process, All Process, and then Linear Fit. Reference image will be the green channel, and then apply the green channel onto the blue channel. This is also going to take a little bit longer than our other photo because this is a significantly larger file size. And then we're going to drop that onto the red channel. Awesome. So that's finished up. Then we're going to go up to Process, All Process, and then we're going to go to Channel Combination, and then we're going to make sure the red, the green, and the blue channels are all selected. And then we're going to click Apply, or you can click F6, and that will create a new image. So let me just close these out. That way we don't have these on our way in the future. And I'm going to full screen, and then I'm going to auto stretch it again, and as you can see, we have a much better image as far as color goes. So our next step is going to be to apply a dynamic background extraction. So you're going to go to Process, Background Modelization, and click Dynamic Background Extraction, and then you can keep the tolerance as is. All of this can stay as is, and then we're going to increase the default sample radius from 5 to 150. And then we're just going to apply those to the edge of the image. And again, there's multiple ways you can do dynamic background extraction. Like I said earlier, some people like to have their sample points placed across the entire image to capture better capture some of that gradient. But I find just dropping your sample points across the edge of the image works pretty well in most cases. And we also want to avoid getting this the outer nebulosity of the Andromeda Galaxy in this image as well. So that should be enough. So we're going to go down to Target Image Correction and then click Subtraction. Let's take a look at our background image, and you can see it has done a good job at capturing the gradient that was in this image. And then we're going to click Control A. And we have a little bit of a darker background here, a slightly higher contrast image, and this is looking pretty good already. So now what we're going to do is, again, we're going to start our color calibration here. We're going to select a region here that doesn't have that many stars in it, and then we're going to select the center of the Andromeda Galaxy. And we're going to go to color calibration, and then background neutralization, and then we're just going to neutralize the backgrounds. Then we're going to go to Process, Color Calibration, and then click Color Calibration. We're going to uncheck Structure Detection, and then we're going to set the white reference as the core of the Andromeda Galaxy. And then you can also set the background reference again as the preview we already made. So then we're just going to drop this onto the image. I didn't do much in this case, but it's good to do sometimes to have a more natural color to it. Sweet. So zooming in again, you can see that there is not much in the way of noise. There is a little bit of noise in the image, but it is very, very minute. But just to keep the process consistent, what I'm going to do is perform another noise reduction in this image before applying the stretch to the histogram. So what I'm going to do again is go up to Script, Easy Processing Suite, and then I'm going to click Easy Denoise. We're going to select the Andromeda Galaxy or image 5DBE as our image. And then we're going to click Run Easy Denoise. So because this is a significantly larger file size than what I was dealing with earlier, this is going to take a little bit. So what I'm going to do is pause the video at this point and come back when our image has been fully noise reduced. Okay, awesome. So now our noise reduction script has finished up and we're left with an image that is significantly less noisy. Now granted, this image didn't have much noise to begin with in the first place, but if we zoom in, we can clearly see that little bit of noise that I was talking about has been reduced. So now what you're going to do is you're going to want to apply this stretch to your histogram. So you're going to go up to Process, All Process, and then Histogram Transformation. And then you want to make sure to click Reset, and then Process, and then you're going to pull up the Screen Transfer function. So what you're going to do here again is you're going to simply apply the Screen Transfer function onto our histogram, and that will stretch the image, and then you're going to click Apply. And then you're going to turn off the preview, and you're left with your stretched nonlinear image that has been fully color calibrated. It has been, the background has been extracted, the gradient background I should say, and has had a noise reduction applied to it. So now what I'm going to do is pull up that ArcSine stretch tool again, click Reset, and we're just going to up the stretch factor just a hair, and then we're going to up the black point. And again, the idea being here is you want to have as much of a high contrast image as possible. And then we're going to drop it onto the image and see if we like it. And this is looking really good. So what we're going to do now is extract the luminance channel, and we're going to increase the saturation of this image. So we're going to go to Process, and then we're going to pull up that LRGB combination tool. Let's click Reset. Let's uncheck the R, the G, and the B channels. And then for the luminance channel, you're going to want to find the luminance channel we just extracted. And then you're going to go under Transfer Functions. You're going to find the saturation tool, and then you're just going to drop that down to about 2.5, and then I'm going to apply this to our image. Terrific. So this is a really good image already. There's not much green in the image, although it might be my eyes, but I'm noticing just a little bit of green above the Andromeda Galaxy. So what I'm going to do is go to Process, and then I'm going to pull up the SCNR tool. And then once again, I'm just going to extract 80% of the green from this image. Terrific. So this is what I would consider to be, in this case, a final image. You can do things like, for example, if you look, you see the core of the Andromeda Galaxy is really bright. You could go to Process, and then you can go find the HDR multi-scale transform, and then check to lightness and lightness mask. And what this will do is it will reduce the brightness around the central core of the Andromeda Galaxy. And this will just take a few minutes. So that actually doesn't look so good in my opinion if I take that out and change the number of layers from 6 to 8. And again, this is all sort of user preference. If you like that, by all means, go with it, but I like there to be a little less of a HDR multi-scale transform. Sweet. And that looks really good there. So just to give you an idea, some more things you can do with this. You could also create a mask, and then you could also reduce some of the contrast, or increase the contrast a little bit, excuse me, by darkening the background a little bit more. But overall, I consider this to be a really good image, and this was an incredible amount of data that was supplied to us, and this was a beautiful image. You can tell that darks, the flats, the biases have all been applied to this image, and this is a fantastic piece of work. Moving on to our last image of this post-processing tutorial, we're going to hit Control-A once again to show us a preview of the histogram transformation. And as you can see, we once again have an image of the Andromeda Galaxy. The very first thing that I see looking at this image that you can clearly see there's some heavy stacking artifacts along the edge of the field of view here. So I'm just going to go to Process, All Process, Dynamic Crop, and I'm just going to simply crop those out. Sweet. So once again, we do have a bit of an unusual color cast here, so we're just going to split the RGB channels. And then we're going to pull up our linear fit tool. Use the green channel as our reference. And just drop it onto our blue and red channels. So that's blue, and this one is red. Sweet. And our next step is just going to be combine those channels into a new separate image. So we're just going to find our channel combination tool, and then have red selected, green selected, blue selected. Make sure our RGB is selected as our color space. It should be by default, but double check to make sure. And then just click Apply. And that's going to create a new image. So just going to close this one out. Just make sure they're out of our way. And then we're just going to hit that histogram transformation auto stretch again. So here's our shot of the Andromeda Galaxy. A couple things I note right away looking at this image. We once again are dealing with coma, just like we were in the first image. I'm also noticing like this weird little blotch right here. I'm not exactly sure what that is, and that could be a result of either not taking flat frames or having flat frames that might have been too bright, for example, or something like that, because there's definitely a distortion here that could be the result of some sort of imperfection in the raw image files. But besides that, this is still a really, really good image. I'm just pointing out some of the things to be looking for if you're an astrophotographer and you're relatively new and you start seeing things like a blotch here or misshapen stars along the edge of your image. Just look out for things like that. But what we're going to do is we're just going to apply our dynamic background modelization again. So we're just going to go to Dynamic Background Extraction, click Refresh, and then we're going to increase our sample radius to 150, and click Resize, and just we're going to drop those along the edge of the image. Being sure not to get any of the Andromeda Galaxy, looks like I got a little bit there. I'll just delete that sample. Sweet. So then we're just going to click Correction, and then go to Subtraction, and then click Execute. So let's take a look at our background that we've extracted. We can see that gradient has been subtracted out. And then we're just going to auto stretch our new image. And comparing the two, I'll close this out real quick. Comparing the two, you can see where the dynamic background extraction tool shines. You can tell that the sort of color cast in this image, this sort of weird gradient that's through the image, has been taken out, and you're left with a much more even image. And like I said, that gray sort of blob there is still pretty evident, but we'll be able to get rid of that in post-processing, I think. Terrific. So now we're going to go up to Process, Color Calibration, and then Background Neutralization. We're going to create a new preview here of our background. looking for an area that's relatively low on stars, and then we're going to set that as our reference image. And then we're just going to drop that onto the image. It didn't do much in this case, but from time to time it definitely helps. So next thing we're going to do is go to color calibration and then create a new preview for the core of the Andromeda Galaxy. That's going to be our white reference for this image. Set that preview as our white reference. I will make sure structure detection is unchecked, and then set our background reference as the preview we created in the step prior. And then we're just simply going to drop that onto there. And then just delete those previews. So again, this didn't do too much here, but for other situations, especially situations where you have a lot of light pollution or your color or white balance isn't exactly what you like it to be, the color calibration tool is really good at this. But in this case, the colors were pretty close to being spot on straight away, which is really good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go up to Script, Easy Processing Suite, and then Easy Denoise, and then we're just going to apply the denoise to our linear image. I might have mentioned it earlier in the video, but I want to mention it again. It's really important to make sure you do most of your denoising before you apply the histogram transformation to your image. Otherwise, the results might not be so good. So we're just going to run the Easy Denoise, and then we're just going to pause the video until this is done. Okay, so the noise reduction process is finished up, and we are definitely left with an image that is significantly less noisy. If we zoom in, we can see how the noise situation has been dramatically improved, and that is looking significantly better. So what we're going to do is, once again, we're going to apply the this preview of our histogram stretch to our histogram, and we're going to do that by going up to Process, All Process, and then pulling up the Screen Transfer. Whoops, wrong tool. We're going to pull up the Screen Transfer Function tool, and we're also going to pull up the Histogram Transformation tool. We're going to make sure our image is being selected here, and then we're just going to drop the Screen Transfer function onto our histogram, and that will automatically stretch it. Click Apply, turn off the preview, and here is our nonlinear stretched image of the Andromeda Galaxy. So looking at this image, we can try to do the arcsine stretch here that we've done on our last two images and see what that gets us. So I'm just going to up the stretch factor a little bit here, and I'm also going to up the black point just a bit, and then let's see what that looks. So that's looking pretty good, but we still again have that problem right here with this this weird gradient right here that I mentioned earlier. So what I'm actually going to do is a little bit different here. I'm going to go up to Process, All Processes, and then I am going to select Range Selection if I can find it. So we pull up the Range Selection tool, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to create a mask of the Andromeda Galaxy. That way I can pull up the I can pull down the brightness of the background here a little bit using the Curves tool. So what I'm just going to do is increase the lower limit until I just have the Andromeda Galaxy and that spiral galaxy orbiting the Andromeda Galaxy. I forget its messier name, I think M110 if I'm not mistaken, or M101. Then what we're going to do is we're going to increase the fuzziness just a little bit, and then we're going to bring up the smoothness a lot. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe up this a little bit more. That's pretty good right there. And then what we're going to do is create that mask. So we have our mask created here, and then what we're going to do now is go up to Mask, select Mask, and then select Range _ Mask, and then we're going to click Invert Mask. So we've created a mask here that will mask the core regions of the Andromeda Galaxy as well as the two satellite galaxies I mentioned earlier. We're going to remove, turn off Show Preview, and then we're going to go over to the Curves tool, if I can find it, curves transformation. And then we're going to start our preview. So what this is going to do is going to darken out the background while keeping the core of the Andromeda Galaxy nice and bright. We may lose a bit of the edge of the Andromeda Galaxy, but that's okay, as long as we can get rid of this sort of misshapen gradient right here. So let's see if we have any luck. You don't want to go too crazy with it, otherwise you might get an unnatural result. I think that's looking pretty good. Okay, so we weren't completely successful in removing it. Doing so would probably require a more in-depth post-processing tutorial, but disregarding that, the rest of the image looks fine to me. So what I'm going to do is remove the preview, and next thing I'm going to do is extract the luminance channel. And once again here, the goal is going to be to increase the contrast, or excuse me, not the contrast, the saturation of this image. So we're going to pull up our LRGB combination tool, uncheck R, G, and B, and then apply that luminance channel to our image, drop the saturation down to 0.25, 0.24, I'm going to do 2.4, or 0.24, excuse me, and we're just going to drop that onto our image. And we should hopefully get more of those light blues on the outer edge of the Andromeda Galaxy and those yellows. And that's looking good right there. Zooming in here. Another thing I also want to point out about this image, if you look carefully when you zoom in, you notice the stars across the image are all streaked a little bit. That's not a result of the image, but it appears to be the result of periodic error in the mount. A telescope mount tracks really good, but doesn't track perfectly good. So many amateur astronomers use what's called an autoguider to be able to correct for the errors in their mount's tracking. It doesn't appear in this case that the tracking was 100% perfect, so as a result, the stars sort of streaked in one direction as a result of imperfections in the motion of the mount. That's another thing you want to keep your eye on when you're actually taking your images. But I don't think, it's very minimal here. I just want to point it out. It does not distract from the image, which I think is really good overall. So what we're going to do is go up to Process, and then we're going to pull up the SCNR tool, and we're again going to remove some of that green in that image. I like to remove about 80%, and then we're just going to drop it onto our image. Sweet. So this is looking really good. One more step I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the star size in the image. So I'm going to go up to Script, Easy Processing Suite, and then I'm going to do the Star Reduction tool. We're going to select our image here, and all I'm going to do here is simply just create a mask for us to use. So that's going to take a few minutes. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause the video here and come back when it's ready. So we have gone ahead and created a star mask using the Easy Star Reduction tool. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to go to Mask, select Mask, and we're going to apply that mask we just created. And I'm actually going to show that mask really quick, and you can see how all the stars we want to be focusing on are not selected, but the Andromeda Galaxy is masked out, which is exactly what we want to be achieving. So I'm just going to turn off the mask preview there. Then I'm going to go to Process, All Process, and then I'm going to go down to Morphological Transformation, and we have the same settings as from our first image when we did this, and we're just going to drop it onto our image here. And that looks really good right there. 100% I think was appropriate. And I think this is a really good final image. I think this is something that looks fantastic. And this is something, if you got to this point, I think you'd be really excited with the final results. So that's going to do it for this post-processing tutorial. Again, my name is Kyle with HighPoint Scientific. Thank you guys so much for submitting your images. It was so fun to process each and every one of them and taking a look at them and seeing all the different types of images our followers produce, because this is great, this is beautiful, and this is a fantastic result. If you like this type of content we produce, please feel free to like this video, subscribe to our channel. It really means a lot to us. But until next time, my name is Kyle, I'm with High Point Scientific, and always remember to keep looking up.